in this land, the undead are corralled and led to the north, where they are wrecked to await the end of the world.
Don't let them take it from you.
This is your fate.
Chasing popularity is an endeavour as useless as flying to space on the back of a pigeon. Now, I personally have never had to, being able to perfectly mould my personality around any social group, allowing me to blend in completely seamlessly. But for those of us who don't have my expert social chameleonism, it can be soul-crushing to constantly pursue a certain status, always remaining one step behind, because the very act of chasing being cool proves to everyone that you are indeed not. I see this trend everywhere I look. In the guy who changes up his stride and squints like he's in direct sunlight anytime he walks past a beautiful woman, in the business executive trying to get their underpaid employees to do quirky viral dances in order to get the opportunity to give more of their labor in exchange for money. And yes, I see this in gross excess in the video game industry. There has never been a game come out that has been unique, interesting, and most importantly, financially successful without shortly being followed by far less confident imitators. And while this does make sense, all the pigs of the world will gravitate to the biggest and sloppiest trough of money they can find and will take the quickest route they can to get there, I am consistently shocked by how egregious this imitation can be. There are many titans of interactive entertainment who seem to look at a great game with humble respect, use their vast wisdom to pinpoint exactly which features drive player engagement and satisfaction, and then courteously pass on to their team their enlightened findings along with notes on what they could do to enhance and evolve the experience. No, they just copy it and add microtransactions and delete it forever on the second it becomes a financial burden. But that is just capitalism. I'm not going to stand around and explain that to you for the next hour because you already know it. Most people love hating on capitalism nearly as much as they love supporting it. Today, I'm going to focus on the games that break the mold, the games that crack through the murated frames of their formula and achieve something beyond not just the other imitators, but the originals as well. And the only way to quantify the difference between imitation and inspiration is to look at the most shamelessly copied subgenre of them all. The Soulslike.
Fuck. Oh, I hate the city.
Glory, hallelujah, since I've laid my burden down. Glory, glory, hallelujah, since I've laid my burden down. No more sickness, no more sorrow, since I've laid my burden down. No more sickness,
Much better.
no more sorrow, since I've laid my burden down.
The Soulslike is an endlessly frustrating genre for me because never has there been a sect of games with more differences on the outset that lure you in and get you to spend your hard-earned money thinking that you're about to experience something new and interesting, only then to prove themselves to be functionally identical to every other member of their class in terms of game feel, tone, level design philosophy, and that all-too-familiar lore sprinklage that got old the minute I had to start studying the underbust measurements of Jennifer's girdle to understand why I even wanted her dead in the first place.
Your bust is fine, Jennifer.
Yeah, they slap a new coat of paint on, set it in a place and add a mechanic or two that the others don't, but there's always that moment half an hour in where I just realise I'm playing Dark Souls 3 again, which renders the entire experience more shallow than the bust within Jennifer's girdle.
Actually, if we just lift these up a bit.
The result of this arduous likeness is, I think, a pretty big reason why a lot of people are getting tired of games in this genre. You already have Dark Souls 3, so why would you want to play it again, except here the only difference is that you control an anime character who looks out of place anytime they aren't stood in a jar. I am nonplussed. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm simply uninterested in the Chinese monkeys and the 25th iteration of the immortal undead. If you aren't going to do anything more bold than the brave men on the original frontiers of game development did back in the early 2010s, then do me a favor and call it a day. But I would be remiss if I was completely negative about New Thing in favor of Old Thing, because I actually love New Thing even more than Old Thing if it advances an extension to its shadow. if it uses its own wit and creativity to push beyond the outmoded accomplishments of the original and establish a new frontier ahead of the old. This is hard to do. Sometimes it feels like the world is so ransacked full of little critters known as humans that the limits of what can be imagined and then actually produced has already been done. I can sit here all day with my 500mg edible on the Take No Prisoners comedy podcast and say,
dude, what if there was a movie where like Santa fucked an elf and made a half elf, half human hybrid that killed Santa and like made Christmas fucking evil?
And that's all well and good, and A24 would make it into a real film and be lauded for their subversive and anti-establishment individualism. But beyond the surface level aesthetic changes, all that's really happening here is effectively a remake of The Apprentice, Harry Potter, The Lorax, Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed, Godfather, Frankenweenie, or, well, Frankenstein. Digging into any film that looks interesting on the outside almost all the time reveals a painfully uninteresting core that comes in the same form as dozens of other films within its class, breaking the mold of setting, character, exact order of events, but nearly never breaking the mold beneath the mold concerning the building blocks of the piece of art itself. It's not impossible to break that inner mold, it just can't be done when trying to ape the achievements of someone else. But the thing I love about video games is that they are so multifaceted and dense with the innumerable tiny parts that make them up, that they can, and very often do, copy from their predecessors in some aspects, while mutating and evolving others so intensely that our perspective of the overall experience becomes completely unique. In fact, in some very rare cases, it only takes one aspect of design dialed into absolute perfection to take a game from loser to schmoozer, to lift it up from the blight towns of interchangeable mediocrity and catapult it to something less bad. I've run out of words in my thesaurus. Let's talk about The Surge is the hidden Souls-like micro-series that not only felt surplus to requirement even back in the late 2010s, an era before the endless yet another's plaguing my current YouTube recommended page, but also brought a clumsy sameness to the at the time burgeoning genre, to the cyberpunk brutalist setting, to the telling of a story in general, which from an outsider's perspective makes them seem even more uninteresting than the words ludonarrative eucatastrophe. The Surge 1 held nothing except contempt for me for even daring to play it. So after seeing that the first game was made up from the same ingredients as Lost Izalith, The Tomb of the Giants, and all of Dark Souls 2, I started playing the sequel with my teeth gritted harder than the guy who sits in the chair in the corner of hotel rooms. I was unequivocally prepared for a catastrophe of boredom and indifference, and for a little while, I seemed to be right. The opening of The Surge 2 did nothing to assuage any negative preconceptions I had. It's too long, it meanders lazily through a series of slow, handheld rooms where you learn how to walk and then how to punch one or two extremely pathetic enemies, and then all of a sudden it cranks the difficulty up to a completely stupid level for the first boss. He has a Mariana Trench health pool and is of multi-galaxy level power, and so you have to jump around the room, smacking him on the rump for 5 minutes and then running away because you're just so shy until he eventually attritionally crumbles like an uneaten pastry. It just felt lazy, and so that catastrophe of design felt contractually inevitable, like this game wanted to end up refunded or stranded at the bottom of an I guess I might return to this one day pile. But fortunately for me and all the other self-gaslighting gamers around this world, this game pulls a trick immediately after that turned my opinion of it so completely on its head that it started doing somersaults. Because there is one aspect of this game that is so brain-meltingly good that it not only establishes itself as a pinnacle achievement within its now hotly contested subgenre, but also gloriously surpasses this same aspect even in the forefathers of the Soulslike. This is why I am talking about this. The Surge 2 wins at level design. The levels in The Surge 2 feel as though they were designed by a man who answers in the affirmative whenever anyone asks him if he wants sugar in his tea. In other words, they feel like they were designed by an insane man. This game takes place in the singular, large, coherently structured city of Jericho, which you explore in phases as you periodically branch out to adjacent districts, the completion of which bolsters the meaty broth of courage in your bones and lets you venture deeper into the overall city without pulverization. This alone creates a real coherency of space that is seldom seen in other Souls-likes. You always have to reacquaint yourself with the same central area while deepening your knowledge of it each time you want to further your objectives. And there's no fast travel, so when, as it often happens, your goal is on the other side of this dense thicket of terror in the middle, you have to find a new way to approach that thicket, with new through routes and shortcuts becoming available as you get stronger, acquire more equipment, or just have that iron grip Dark Souls learned bravery to run through and avoid everything. Here there is a comparable amount of content and sheer things to do as a Lies of P or a Steel Rising, but because of the way you traverse that content, I remember the layouts and the interconnected triangulations of points on those layouts way better. And as a consequence, I remember the world much better as well. And that makes it so much more interesting. In the real world, when I'm scarcely bold enough to venture into it, do I hop in my teleportation device and arrive where I want to be, fully formed and 100% free of insect DNA? No. I have to walk there with my feet or drive there on my wheels, and I have to feel every step of that journey. I can see the headline here: Gaming YouTuber discovers going outside. And that is a fair summation, because when you're zoned into a little screen experiencing a reality that is completely unlike the one your physical body is in, it necessitates a disconnect with that physicality in order to buy, at least on some abstract level, that you are this other thing. I am not a weaponized freak of nature, I'm just a regular freak of nature. And when I die, I'm not going to pop up again in the last place I rested. I really desperately wish that was true so I could have a lot more fun while I'm driving, but it's just not. We are bound by the speed limits of our bodies and have to live with the fundamental acceptance that this is the one time that we're in this moment. And in this moment, I have to travel from A to B. It's a small thing, not putting in a teleportation button, but it has a big impact on the way I think about this game. I know this city now. I know it in much the same way as I know Gloucester or Coventry or any number of dross-ridden strongholds in this
backward, grotty little country.
And the overall game structure, having you dip in and out of the city from all different angles, forcing you to find new ways across it all the time, is partially responsible for that. But there's an even more important element to these two wonderful words that really boosts the Surge 2 into my upper echelon of Souls games, and one that if any developers chose to channel in their own project, I would be as enthusiastic as a dog on a pillow to trade in my capital in exchange for product. This element I'm speaking of concerns the way each of the components within the overall city are themselves put together with the precision of the script of a reality TV show. Each district is a certifiably bonkers labyrinth of unbelievable density, a fractalitic lattice of shortcuts, one-way doors, looping pathways, branching options, and beautifully comprehensive needle-drop moments of scenery that reveal where everything is in relation to each other and provide you with a gratifying sense of, yes, I now understand. I understand everything. Unlike the dozens of praise the pointless moments littered throughout every Soulslike, unfortunately including the Alpha Squad, wherein a space exists without reason, every single piece of square footage here has a legitimate purpose behind it being there. This small alleyway might seem pointless at first. It leads to nowhere and has no intriguing lore connection. But a very important lesson the Surge 2 imparts onto us is that you don't need to have some unrealistically decoded piece of graffiti in order to apply arbitrary worth to that space, because it's much better to use that space to build an exploratory atmosphere within the world. This alleyway feels pointless at first, but then way later on, while burnt out from several particularly rough customers, and frankly at the point where the idea of video gaming seems a lot less fun than sitting in the corner, thinking, you open a door, hoping against hope it'll bring you somewhere that won't undo all of your hard-wrought progress, and you end up, as if by magic, back in this alleyway. It didn't feel as if you were anywhere near it. It seemed like you had ventured so far away and had so many other pieces of information wedged into your brain that you had almost forgotten that this was even here. But you realize upon returning that you never really actually forgot it. This is the secret trick pulled by this game that truly pushes it beyond all other Souls-likes when it comes to the place you're running about in all the damn time. The world is built with the layered exactitude of one of those enormous Lego sets everyone is too poor to afford, with a comparable number of little pieces making it up. Each doorway, passage, bridge, outcrop, pathway, clearing, lift, zipline, platform, and interconnecting strand between each and every enemy, item, medbay, NPC, set piece, boss, piece of transitionary scenery is so intentionally laid out that it feels 100% cohesive no matter if you zoom all the way out or all the way in. the world design equivalent of coding at the memory level, and the result of this universal decisiveness is an unparalleled fervor in this world they've created. As you play, it becomes gradually more discernible that because of all this maniacal control of the puzzle pieces of space on a macro and micro level, there also exists an intention behind this design. You can see exactly where you were an hour ago far below you, and you know that you have made progress. You reach a clearing of several options to go ahead through and know that each one of them is itself intricately, deliciously structured for the purpose of sating a need for discovery. You break through a wall and find that you have looped back onto a place that you didn't even realize you remember. You think you've gone far, but really, you're in the same place. Video games are meant to be fun, right? The evolution of a gamer's relationship with games throughout adolescence and into adulthood is unfortunately reminiscent of their relationship to pretty much everything else. Back in the murky waters of childhood, I remember being utterly entranced by any virtual world presented before me, regardless of how superficial that world was. I would look at the boundaries of the character select screen and world map and pray, just sit there seething and praying that there could be anything beyond it. A part of me really believed that there could be some magical combination of inputs that could unveil a whole hidden cast of avatars, or some backward convoluted path through the wastelands on the world border that might bring out another world from the endless gaping maw of barren death. But then, as it always happens, age and a continued interest in computerized entertainment brings with it an understanding of skyboxes and UV mapping and real-life technical stuff that renders that whole hidden cast of characters impossible due to the developer's budget constraints, and completely diminishes the impact of a theoretically endless world thanks to horrendously dull terms like procedural generation. It's just rude, isn't it? The fact that learning more about anything proves anything to just be kind of boring. I think that many gamers follow a trajectory of simplification, starting out as a child playing acclaimed releases, experimental smaller projects, and lazy cash grab movie tie-ins with equal dewy-eyed intrigue, being mystified by worlds within worlds and temporarily handing their consciousnesses in their entirety over to another form of life. But as the world's erosion melts the soul of the attrited gamer, less interest is allocated for these fake things in order to make space for the real things they now have to worry about. Jobs, bills, health plans, and prostate exams. Most gamers end up playing 1 or 2 games just to rewind, and will play only those for the foreseeable future. And that, combined with these gazillion-dollar companies figuring out how to contain a child's sense of wonder completely within their own multiverse of Fortnite or Roblox, has led to a simplification of the entire medium. The giants from 6 years ago remain the giants today, and will mostly still be the giants going forward, which leads to a true, real, and irrevocable sense of how do we get back to that wonder? How do we choose to forget the painfully real world and enjoy a silly little video game? How can I entrance myself once again? I think the answer lies in fun. I think I tend to wax so philosophically about things that amount to a simple distraction for most people, so much so that I can lose the undercurrent of what video games are really about. And when it comes to Soulslikes, what more can I do except point you in the directions of the ones that, at the end of the day, are the most enjoyable to play? So let's talk about fun. And let's talk about Another Crab's Treasure is a case study into the pointlessness of all the dreariness and drudgery found in nearly every other Souls-like, which I'm sorry if you're one of those people who either like hurtling into concrete paving at 120 miles per hour in the hopes of breaking through to the center of the earth, or enjoy the emotionally equivalent task of beating the Dark Souls games at Soul Level 1, is not the reason why most people are playing a video game. To be clear, I am part of this group of people. I tend to click add to basket on any game or film involving racially motivated genocide or toothless Soviet oppression so fast and so often that my doctor thinks I spend all my time wanking. But my particular brand of masochism through media is not the universally preferred escape method from the world. Thus, the intensely overbearing omnipresence of dread soaked through most Souls-likes doubtlessly relegates them to the corner of the ecosphere. A corner that has grown massively over the last 10 years, but A corner nonetheless that will never be the center because a child is never going to wear a t-shirt that says ceaseless discharge on it. However, this game, this still brutally difficult Metroidvania-esque boss battles that are designed to a T plagued, risky exploration that could end at any moment afflicted, moments of such forceful brutalism that they make you question why you don't just play Fortnite instead, ridden game with themes of environmental collapse that are equally as disheartening as those of the prophetic doom of every civilization, is magnanimously unlike anything else in its genre in terms of the emotions going through your head while playing. Another Crab's Treasure is so damn fun on this surface scuttering, perpetual acidity, pure input to output level that you might forget that it's about the same thing as this really sad image.
Oh no, those poor oil tankers. I hope they get out okay.
Yeah, pretty much. The developers of this game saw yet another article on marine life getting asphyxiated by plastic packaging and thought, what if we made this epic? This is the result, and I'm not reticent to admit, they did make it epic. Every second of gameplay exudes an expressiveness hitherto unseen in any other Souls-like. You swipe at enemies with the flagrant scrappiness of a youthful elephant seal, you puddle through the water like a briefly surfacing drowning drunk, and you dart between the chasmic space between points in the same jerking fashion as the arm of a man stealing your lighter in the smoking area. And that is just the expressiveness of the creature you control. The ocean around you breathes with the same radiant character. Each area is a grand edging of color and creative ideas. There is never a staleness to the originality of each new place, which often leads you from an intended playtime of an hour or two into a goon hole of a far longer time sink. And as you play, you start to think, surely it can't keep going on like this. Surely I'm going to reach the limit soon and I'll be forced to do something dumb and repetitive, and I'm going to become so lachrymose I'll have to resort to sitting in the corner thinking. But no, you keep pressing to find the end of the new stuff that lies in wait for you, but you never do. And as you reach that summit on a summit and see yet another summit to surmount, or as you descend into the heart of all things and somehow fall off and end up in the bowel, you really start to feel that there is no edge to come to. You'll be edging forever. And through that, all those moments of delighted exploration, silly little surprises, and references to please the true fan, it all flips back on our perception of the main guy. He personifies the world around him with his outset of innocence that reveals itself to actually be deadly, his ability to mask himself within the rubbish all around him by swapping out shells, and his fluid, weeble-wobbling movement that sets itself apart from the world around in its explosive scrappiness, but is simultaneously concurrent with it in terms of its expressiveness and unpredictability. All of this contributes to a wildly earnest main character, one who puts his entire heart, soul, and groin into every little action he takes, and who simply would not fit in at all in any public education system because of a complete inability to be too cool for anything. He's never too cool to not give his 1,000,000% to every hit, dodge, and counter, never too chill to not run everywhere as fast as he can like a year 7 with an enormous backpack, and never too icy to not give a fuck at every part of the narrative, even if it would benefit him hugely to do so. The game's story is one big quest to not let go of one of the pettiest things that feels like the biggest thing in the world: the shell of the crab. It's stolen at the very beginning and is kept by the influence of the universe just out of the reach of our main little guy for the entire runtime. So many times coming so close to getting it back, but because of the charmless wit of the powers that be, the closer you get, the further away you realize you really are. But it's not as if this dangling shell on a stick leaves you running around stark naked, scarring all the local children and making a lot of money for the nearby psychotherapist, because there are hundreds of other, dare I say better, shells scattered all over the place that is a core mechanic to the game's combat. And the goals which you accomplish at the whims of other people, whom you grow to loathe greatly and which you do supposedly in exchange for your shell, become absurdly difficult and require a pilgrimage-level distance to travel. So any of us would quite rightly just have no choice but to accept what was written in the sand and go about wearing condoms on our backs for the rest of our lives if we had to. But not this guy. I mean, sure, the shell is obviously very special to him, but the importance of even very special things must sometimes still be outweighed when the absolute core of your world must be fundamentally changed in order to keep it. And yet here we are, with our little guy attempting the combative equivalent of attracting the girl you like by standing mysteriously in the corner and staring at the ground. Why attempt the impossible? What's the point in feeding that heart fire that causes you to come back again and again to a gunfight with a fork, to keep on with the brick punching, the slingshotting, the hair's breadth from hopeless mountain climbing that is the power dynamic between our little crab and his gargantuan enemies? Why even try at all when the alternative is going home and just not doing all of that? Well, this is where Another Crab's Treasure achieves its moment of ascension, because the more you ask these kind of questions, the more you realize that the game itself doesn't actually have any of the answers. Sure, later on in the game, they introduce this existential alternative motivation in the form of an orb reading demonic-sounding prophecies to us, but most of this remains metaphorical and even reinforces the true motivation at play. The game does not have any answers, which only puts emphasis on why you play a difficult game in the first place. Mountains are meant to be climbed, just as Soulslikes are meant to be conquered. And Another Crab's Treasure captures that essence, the need to conquer, the will to see new things, and the stubborn power of attempting things that you could never see yourself actually completing. And it uses this to incite one of the most enjoyable gaming experiences of its genre. But this essence goes beyond you playing the game to the game itself. Another Crab's Treasure is a clone, but a proud clone. And one that has to be included in this video because it is a sincere clone, one that loves and respects the originals, but does so much more. It could have stopped at the references. It could have been an hour long and made you giggle a little bit and move on and never think about it again. But it chose, in great defiance to what is easy to do the hard thing, which is to go far beyond that and construct a plethora of awesome environments, uniquely challenging enemies and bosses, and a fully integrated and thorough world for the sake of upholding its own vision in its own right. This is a very important lesson. It is 1 billion times better to do the hard thing, to push yourself beyond what others expect of you and even what you expect of yourself, and to plunge your entire heart into something with 100% not too cool for anything sincerity. People get famous and rich from copying other, more earnest creatives all the time, but in doing so, they lose something far more valuable. My thumbs up. Another Crab's Treasure gets my thumbs up. And trust me, game developers out there, you want this thumbs up. It's good, it's clean, it's not even been in that many orifices. The great Roman poet Publius Ovidius Naso once said on brainyquote.com, "Fortune and love favor the brave." I vehemently disagree. While it is true that taking risks and being bold and saying no, 1,000 times no when offered drugs may in part contribute to building a mindset that may one day reap earthly rewards, the way this quote is phrased seems to put an unwavering onus on both the rich to be brave and the brave to be rich, when, in fact, evidence suggests a negative correlation to these two factors. The 10 richest people hoard more wealth than 3.1 billion of the world's poorest, and all of these people took their most daring risks when they were scrappy and young. For the most part, I would attribute an observatory understanding to the way the world is going to this success. Elon Musk coded a business directory for his first big payout, and Mark Zuckerberg was a pretty regular college student who simply found a more lucrative path outside of his studies. I'm sure these guys felt like a main character of a movie as they were doing this, and if you want to call them brave, then go for it. I would love to stop you, but I'm just a fragment on a screen. But the thing about money, and lots and lots and lots of money, is that once you have it, you become surprisingly inclined to keep it. This leads to things like dividends through stocks, so you never have to sell any of your assets to keep your orgies well funded, pithy shows of charity to abate the criticism of poor betas, and wealth creation for the sake of wealth creation that just looks like a screenshot of the endgame of Hungry Shark Evolution. That is not bravery to me. The portion of worldly bravery that creates billions of dollars, or even the genuine acts of gallantry that occur in life or death situations, is but a crumb on the edge of one slice of the pie that is the sum of bravery that really exists. Bravery is going to that job interview. Bravery is talking back. Bravery is climbing that tree. Bravery is asking for where the nearest food bank is. Bravery is getting help. Bravery is assuading the adage of the invincible cowboy. Bravery is accepting people for who they are. There is no courage in the ick. In short, the overwhelming majority of bravery that exists in every one of our lives is the silent kind. Those small decisions that very few people, if anyone, see you making, but that influence on an enormous scale how you feel about yourself. I'm going to give you an insight to my approach to artistic expression real quick. I love small bravery. Anything that defies the narrative of the way that things go in the world. Anything that exists in contrary to art makes money, therefore make more art to make more money, simply because it would not have made enough money to further anyone's egotistical aspirations. So, in consequence, it exists. Just to exist. Just as a method of expression. My favourite game I'm going to talk about today fits into that wonderfully. I've barely heard anyone talk about it, but what it does is just so insanely awesome that I would be sorely butthurt not to give it its due on the grand world stage of my 466 subscribers. My favourite Souls-like game...
Clash Artifacts of...
Huh? Fucking hell, you're early. No, I was just trying to hit my mark. Yeah, and you wait for me to say my favourite Souls-like game...
Clash Artifacts of Chaos!
No, you fucking... idiot, you complete fucking moron. You couldn't tell an acorn apart from your own tiny bollocks. Well, I can try again if you like. Again? No, you can't do it again. They're seeing all this now, you knobbly fucking prick. You know what? Just start anyway, just go for it. No one fucking cares anyway, so fucking... Oh, okay. Clash Artifacts of Chaos is a truly intriguing experience. Intriguing in the way it blends genre with genre, art style with art style, thought with action, and confusion with more confusion. I've always been the type to gravitate towards a game purely if it seems to offer something different to what I've experienced up until now in the real world. Because as we both know, my real life is just so exciting that games about blowing up skyscrapers and seducing women with more than 2 breasts just don't cut it anymore. I need something bizarre, unique, and frankly freaky to become invested these days, and Clash delivers on all 3 of these benchmarks. To describe the playing of this game is to describe the feeling of your friends deciding that they would rather get drunk in a Wetherspoons than frolic in a meadow, or the love of your life joining Tinder just to make friends. Which is to say that this game feels like a deep, gut-wrenching betrayal. You see, when you pick up the controller and start moving and punching and dodging, it bears a striking resemblance in the way it feels to many other Souls-likes, to the point where it almost triggers the same muscle memory and mental micro-strategies that you build up after a certain amount of time in those games. But the betrayal comes from the small differences between Clash and everything else, because the whole game is basically built around those differences. So even though at times it feels like you should play it like, for example, Sekiro because of the parry and riposte systems, actually attempting to do so will get you stomped, pounded, and shat on, because Sekiro was never really designed with multiple enemies in mind, and each enemy it did have had a clear blade or something to attack with, which is just not the case here. But even playing in mind of the obvious comparison, the holy dark ring of gaming discussion will severely hinder you here, because Dark Souls, and in fact every other Souls-like known to me, does not contain strategic, completely non-optional dice games that can drastically change odds in every fight, and honestly about the whole companion thing that basically equates them all to an annoying bird jabbing at your opponent's periphery, and world-shattering perspective shifts that put you in the perspective of a hospitality worker when they finally snap at their area manager for the combat-ending flourishes. All of this stuff is so important that ignoring them will result in an inability to progress, and in practicality the fights play out very differently to any other Souls-like I've played. Many encounters will be fights against not just 1 or 2 scoundrels, and also not against upwards of a dozen either if you're thinking about that kind of Souls-like, but will mostly be against 4 or so enemies who are all completely different, which creates an interesting, albeit somewhat crazy, dynamic and gameplay loop. There is a huge variety of different enemies that are constantly mixed, matched, doubled up, experimentally customized and interchanged so that you genuinely have no idea what could be around the corner. But make no mistake, no randomization is happening here. There is as much intentionality in the placements and combinations of these enemies as there is when a dog falls off a chair and happens to get a mouthful of cake. And so each encounter is designed to push your spatial awareness and priority juggling skills in unique ways, on top of the unique ways that each individual enemy pushes your typical gamer skills of pressing the correct buttons at the correct times, in hopes of avoiding the hemorrhaging of aura that is having to run back through the same area again because you couldn't kill the boss. In the vein of things that are Souls-born, a lot of people talk about the rigid intentionality that drives the Souls experience forward. That tangible feeling that when you die, or really when anything happens at all, it is your fault that it ended up that way. If you didn't swing when you did, dodge when you did, do a little dance when you did, you might still be alive. Every force in your surroundings pushes you in the same meticulously designed way. So it's exclusively up to you how you respond to that determines the outcome of the situationship. It's where the whole gamer gets good attitude comes from, putting blame solely on the player for what happens to their character. But today, I'm here to say something that I don't think has ever been said outside the context of someone defending sexual harassment allegations. Hashtag not all gamers. Because very often in any game, including Soulslike, events transpire that makes things much easier or harder purely based on chance. In fact, it plays a huge factor in every combat encounter, governing when an enemy attacks, what moves they attack with, what move from the other enemies this one might overlap with, and the subsequent effect of where this move ends up positioning you and the enemies in respect to each other. The getting goodness comes from how you react to all these things, which is how some players have beaten the games without leveling up with no magic or armor and with an angry honey badger trapped down their trousers. But the fact remains that how easy or hard the encounters are in the first place still depends a lot on the luck of the draw, especially for normal, non-masochistic players who don't dedicate their lives to iframes and drop rates. So with that in mind, when considering a lot of what Clash does differently, we must understand why it can be beneficial to take certain aspects of control away from the player. For example, the healing system is just weird and kind of obtuse. Although it is a vague facsimile of the Estus Flask system, as your own flask resets upon resting or dying, the comparison becomes farcical should you bring out any more similarities, because you will suddenly be reduced to mincemeat if you rely on your own flask in the same way a Bloodborne player can quickly inject themselves in the side like a gym bro going for his PR, or an Elden Ring player can dip briefly out of the action and then back in with a magically refilled health bar. Trying those strategies will get you killed. Clash takes a far more humanitarian approach to healing, because you have to be far back from the violence to avoid incurring any more damage, and you have to stay back for quite a while even after the heal, because your health crawls back up at a rate that would make an Audi driver behind it angry enough to commit second-degree murder. But even standing far back and giving yourself plenty of time doesn't put you completely in control of being healed, because many enemies can cover far distances very quickly, and so you just have to bite your nails and pray to every god you can think of that your one heal doesn't get squandered. Yeah, for most of the game, I had one flask. And on top of that, and I'm willing to bet many other players, didn't even know how much that one flask would heal you once the healing button was pressed, because you craft your healing potions yourself using foraged materials from the environment, which yield vastly different results depending on whether you mix a rat's tail with a kumquat or a jizz apple. Yes, I am aware that this seems pretty crazy. Since I made the bold and long overdue decision to come out as who I truly am on the inside and transition from console to PC, it seems like the expectation of many games is to be as controllable as possible, with most of the games that thrive specifically on that platform having a major modding factor that provides users with the ability to finely tune their experience to an exactitude that only really surprises in moments of technical failing. Alternative to this are games already with dazzlingly intricate systems of interlocking statuses, simulacrums of real-world concepts, and hundreds of little adjustable parts that all combine to exemplify the joy of control that could make you say, "My life is in tatters, but the waste management in my city is in sublime regulation." This desire for a kind of virtual omnipotence is really interesting to me, and one day when my mind has expanded enough to fathom the scope of Fire Axis and Paradox, I'd love to make a video about it. But with Clash Artifacts of Chaos, the complete opposite is what draws me in. There is an unpredictability at its core that all other game design decisions seem to be drawing out from. You never know for sure where the next hit will come from, how much health you're going to regenerate, what wacky combination or the wackiness of just one enemy you will next run into, and triumphing through that unpredictability is a tremendously uncommon experience. It is a magnificently kind of carefully articulated chaos that sets this game apart, not just from every other Souls-like, but every other game I've played otherwise, because when you succeed in Clash, it's a result earned both from your skill and the very will of the universe. A victory is proof of your main character energy, which flips back on itself like the stink on the soap recently used by a League of Legends player, and consequently proves the game itself to possess this main character quality. Clash Artifacts of Chaos is the main character of Soulslikes. And not in the Senorita Awesome, calling everyone Duderino, not giving away to the right at roundabouts because you're such a Sagittarius way that I absolutely loathe. It is the main character of its genre in the sense that it stands entirely on its own and uses every opportunity to keep itself on the black side of the borderline. It looks nothing like anything else. It functions like nothing else. Playing it like anything else will get you killed, and so I'm forced to think about it like nothing else as well. Clash Artifacts of Chaos exemplifies the power of that boldness. Not many people have played it, but Because of that, pushing its feelers out into unknown territories of experience and blending hilariously discordant concepts to create a truly standalone ordeal is all the more admirable, because Clash exists for the sake of existing, for driving an artistic boundary further than anyone else has dared to, and to just have that. Furthering the frontier of what has been done is the only way that you realize that there is much more to do. And so Clash has the fortuitously gained accolade of being that push and proving that the Soulslike has much more to give if developers would only have the gall to scramble fuck the mechanics of the original and build something unique. Because I think we are lacking in the unique these days. With the dawn of a new civilization that has brought unfettered access to all of the most eccentric people's private-most creations and expressions, an infection of weird has leaked into the public consciousness. The definition of what counts as out there has been shifted galactic distances from where it was before the most popular children's animation was about source engine men's heads sticking out of toilets, and it's worth it for studios to give $90 million to hipsters to make progressively freakier films, all with Willem Dafoe. And although my private-most creations are locked behind a paywall, unfortunately for you, I myself have only been urged to create the things that you watch by the atmosphere of weirder and gradually much weirder things becoming more mainstream popular than ever before. And so, no one actually really cares if you act weirdly. They see weirder things 100 times a day on TikTok. This has been an honestly amazing thing for artists and freaks, but one side effect is that once everything is weird, nothing really is. I don't really bat an eye anymore at media of any kind with bizarre and taboo themes because there is so much of that available elsewhere already, and it has somewhat led me into a crisis of perception about art. When nothing surprises anymore, it seems to flatten everything into the same category of not surprising, which slowly merges all of art together. And when I can no longer focus on the peaks and valleys of the way each artistic expression in itself is definable, I start to look beyond to the purpose of the art itself. Why do we make anything? To say that I made this? To show that this was a thought that I had, and I felt that thought was important enough to be conveyed to as many people as I could convey it to? To turn that thought into financial gain and social hierarchical opportunity? To make you look at me? To turn your time into my time? To steal something from everyone watching? But that is no reason to give up on art or people. If I were to do that, I wouldn't be here. I'd be living in the city. Fuck. Come back to the city. The world used to be a lot smaller. I was lucky enough not to have an iPad in my face all the time when I was a child, so I can really clearly remember getting access to the internet for the first time when I was 11 years old. Back then, my world was my family, my friends, and my doctor. My view and reach were, by and large, the same distance, and so the world felt unknown and small. But then I got a little portal that connected me in a way with all of these unseen people, and since I have been exposed to all of these unseen opinions and thoughts and expressions by millions of real people that exist to me because of this. At no other point in history have we been exposed at such scale to our own size, which leaves a dangling awareness of it in the backs of our heads. When I was 11 years old, my world got unbelievably bigger, and since then I have been different in all the hidden synaptic ways. I often wonder how I'd be different if I was never alluded to the real scale of the world, just as most people never were in the time before the online. Spoiler alert, I think I'd be calmer. There came about a real impersonalization through the internet that pushed opinions to indefensible extremes that no one would ever express in real life, because there's no way that you would fight for your frankly extreme views on intentional gastrointestinal enlargement without alienating everyone around you. And so an avenue to convey such atrocities with anonymity provided a subsequent feeling that it's actually okay to enjoy a little purposeful bloating because there's actually a lot of other people who do too. And so now, with that universal anonymous acceptance of whatever you want or think, it has transformed virtual space into a hall of twisted mirrors where each person is reflected twice. Once by the side of themselves they want the world to see, and once by the side of themselves that they would be damned if it ever did. But if you lead your life with a screen in front of your eyes and you don't live in the most populated area, you can start to think of people in the same dramatized but easily understandable way. They're just not, though. Upon coming to a place where the sheer number of people in the 10 square meters around me is much larger than that of the entire town that I used to live in, this volume of reality began bearing down on my head. This swirling madness of jobs, responsibilities, expectations, industrialization, desires, wants, and endless busyness. All of these bloody people. How am I supposed to feel like myself in all of this? The Soulslike as a genre has been around for a while. A lot of people have had their say on what a good Souls-like game should be, and my opinion on most of them stands as before. I'm still nonplussed. But just because there's a lot of chaff around the field doesn't mean I still can't make any bread. The 3 games I've talked about today exude this wheaty goodness in a way that I really can't help but share with anyone still listening, because even though each of them have their own faults and eccentricities that necessitate leaving a lot of your inherent preconceptions about their genre at the door, birthing yourself into these new worlds with the same open eyes as a screaming, blood-dripping baby will reveal a deeper understanding on the virtues of the Soulslike. The Surge 2 has that slight stink of jank hanging around its animations and a general laziness in its story structure, but its level design is so complexly enchanting that stopping to play it is like pulling yourself out of a honey-coated fleshlight. I just don't have that kind of willpower. And the urge to unfold these unprecedentedly, coherently integrated mazes of choice that are the levels of this game results in an unmatched sense of discovery, a tangible feeling that what is out there to be found is worth the time it takes to find because the act of finding it is so fundamentally satisfying. Another Crab's Treasure is most reminiscent of all the tropes found in every ball-busting brick wall, more difficult than taking a 3-foot pipe up your dark Sahol game that we've become so accustomed to, but it uses its tropes in a much more creative way that enhances the entire experience because it does so much more than just that, proving them to be just the tip of the ice cock that is the wide, expansive, and illustriously detailed world that is more in all of those aspects than any of the game's contemporaries. And Clash, Artifacts of Chaos, while functionally unknown and obscure in the metagame for good reason, proves that you don't need to have so many of the things that other Souls-likes consider non-negotiable, and actually those things are really only holding these other games back. Releasing the shackles of genre convention shows that you never needed them in the first place. Souls-likes are not made up from rigidly intentional combat and consistently reliable Estus flasks, nor are they even proven by the ridiculous aesthetic of Clash, the innate fun of Crabs, or the exploratory orgasm of Surge. The only test by which any Souls-like should be measured is its ability to innovate on what came before. Because when there are so many grayscale shades of slightly different takes on the same thing, it takes a bright, screaming magenta to stand out. And so, when faced with that wall of identical things, when forced to conform to that shapeless mass, the only real option you have is to keep yourself within it. This is why I'm so impressed by these 3 games right here, because they are so undeniably formed from the same base mold, but in their innovation and abject refusal to disappear into the midst of their concomitant friends, they not only manage to create a whole different experience that stands unique in each game's own right, but also they pull the impossible trick of breaking that mold under the mold. I think about Souls-likes completely differently because of these games, and so on closer examination they actually changed the genre they at first glance only fit into. They were so good in themselves that my expectations of what this genre could offer has broadened, and in retrospect has left almost all other Souls-likes huddled in the middle like frightened chickens, not daring to venture out into what could be done. But the thing that has really left me astounded when it comes to these 3 games is that they prove that it doesn't matter that there is more competition to them than seagulls over a fallen bag of chips. The truly teeming multitude of popularity-chasing clones may have an impact on how we now approach a new Souls-like with a withered, suspended interest, but they have no impact whatsoever on how I approach these Souls-likes because they are so completely themselves that any question of anything else becomes foreign and background background while you play them. That is an exceedingly rare thing for a game whose first, most surface level description is already comparing it to something else. In much the same way as it's uncommon for a pantheon of super-powered gods to be slain by a frail little creature whose only ability is an immunity to damage while performing roly-polies, it is also so to be able to maintain rarity in a sea of everything. The facts of life are thus: the hard thing doesn't happen. The common thing is what happens, and that thing is always the simplest way that things can go. The lion eats the lamb. The tornado picks the house up. One grain of sand among 8 billion others is no different at all. And while acceptance of this is correct, according to the way that it goes, I would like to use this opportunity to encourage you to do just one more hard thing and try not to accept this. The world is a massive, scary, and honestly, incomprehensible place. So really, the only way to quantify the unquantifiable is to put it into the right perspective. If the easy thing is gonna happen anyway, if the lion always gets the lamb in the end and the grain of sand melts again into its identical background noise, then why not try the hard? The world isn't small anymore. Everywhere you look, there is just so much bloody stuff that doing anything remotely original feels completely impossible, but that is just reality. A hard truth we have to live with every time we sit down to experience someone else's creation or we create something ourselves. And it is a sentiment shared by every movie review saying this is Jaws meets Shrek, and all the times a moderately difficult game becomes the Dark Souls of X. There will never be anything completely unlike anything else. But that is no reason not to make or do anything. There lies a perhaps even greater achievement in copying something, but keeping your own art. To be somewhere where everything is copied, nothing is unique, where each and every archetype of human, including your own, is omnipresently scattered in your vicinity, proving you to be only one person in an undeniable ocean of identical people. And then you think beyond the city. You think to the scale of a small English city like this, and then to the scale of a larger English city which dwarfs yours, and then to a country, to a continent, to a hemisphere, to a planet, and then to envision all of that scale, that unreal scale of so many people that you could never count them all, even if you dedicated 10 lifetimes to it. And to think of all of that, and to keep your heart despite it. In Dark Souls and in every other Souls-like, the point is that the world is designed to crush you under its thumb, to make you feel completely, infinitesimally small, and then to harness that for your spirit. The fact that you can beat countless, enormous, nightmarish monsters through sheer grit and stubborn will proves that you are more than something to be crushed under a thumb. You are that annoying tack, uncaring to the weight and scale of the mass on top of you, because all of that weight and scale is actually just pushing you further into it, sticking you so deep into its squidgy carapace that you have no choice now but to bear right through. And through that parasitic burrowing of refusing to take losses lying down, that endless determination to only press B and RB and nothing else, you find that it's worth it. The more massive the force compressing you into the dirt, the more worth it is to slowly but surely scrape through to the other side. It's hard to do that, you know, but it is worth it to do the hard thing, to play that difficult video game, to push the genre of your art form further than anyone else has, to go and live in a place that has 300 bajillion people in it, and to try and stay yourself. We shouldn't chase popularity. We should do right by ourselves despite it. I live in the city now. Fuck. I live in the city now.
Be safe, friend. Don't you dare go on.
Tell old Bill when he comes home this morning. Tell old Bill when he comes home this evening. Tell old Bill when he comes home, you better leave them downtown, 'cause alone this morning